USS Monitor, and I will get this done in 20 minutes. I will get this done in 20 minutes, mainly because I need to order lunch. So, USS Monitor. And the date today is Sunday the 14th of May when I'm recording this, so if the world startlingly changes between now and when this comes out, and suddenly all our knowledge of the USS Monitor changes, I apologise. I hope it... well, it's kind of a strange thing, because I'm recording this on the 14th of May, and it's coming out on the 24th of June, so I both always enjoy it when we discover more historical news and new history comes out, and at the same point I'm kind of bricking it and hoping none does. So the USS Monitor. She's probably one of the most famous ironclad warships of all time. I mean, I'd love it to be HMS Warrior, but the thing is, Warrior got built, and people were so scared they never actually fought her. Whereas Monitor got built, gotta go have a battle with the Merrimack. It's not really the greatest battle of all time. They basically spend their time beating at each other, and it's ineffective. The way I tend to describe it is, imagine two fully armored fully armored knights in full plate armor, late sort of plate armor, really good solid stuff, really protective. And then imagine they were hitting each other not with quarterstaves, but with, I don't know. Okay, this is 4-5, mate. Sledgehammer. Imagine if instead of hitting each other with hammer ends, they were just hitting each other with sort of the pole held about here and just going whack, whack. Yes, it's a powerful blow. No, it's not going to do frigging anything to the person inside. It's just not. That's the trouble. You do get this thing that happens when people go, this technology has now made that all irrelevant because we are so powerful in this regard. And yes, you are powerful in that regard. Has it made everything irrelevant? Probably not. Probably not. But, no. Still, shameless book plug. We always like a shameless book plug on this channel. Mainly because shameless book plugs are what help pay bills. They really do. I am in Australia when this comes out on 24th of June. I am in Sydney, I think. And I can tell you now, it will have been a very expensive month for me. Book-wise, cost of the trip-wise, all those things. Thank you for all your support, because without it, it certainly wouldn't have been possible. It's just one of those things of academia. Getting funding for doing research into modern naval history and doing the naval history of ships which are actually preserved and going around the world and doing it is... yeah, that funding just doesn't exist. It should do. If I wanted to go off and do research into something which happened thousands of years ago, I would probably get people biting my hand off to give me money. But tell them I want to go and research something which happened 80 years ago, and look at me going, but that's popular history. It's still history. And I know I called her the Merrimack earlier rather than the Virginia, what she thought, but let's be honest. It started life as the Merrimack. Renaming ships is never lucky. It's not really something you do. The fact that many navies do it, and then those ships tend to not be the luckiest ships, or they tend to rename them and then they stick them in sort of roles like, you are now going to be an accommodation hulk. We're not taking you out to sea. Yes, we renamed you because your name is too valuable to lose from the seagoing fleet, but you're not going to do anything, right? But no, that's not what the Confederate States did. They renamed the Merrimack the Virginia. And so the Battle of Hampton Roads was on. There are several factors in a monitor's design which are supposed to give it protection and security. First off is it is so low. It really is designed for Swedish waters. I'm sorry, but the fact is the designer spends most of his life, John Ericsson, worried more about the defense of Sweden than he does about the defense of America, but he does have a lot of faith in his country. And there is a reason why Sweden builds as many monitors as they do, because it's actually ideally perfect for their scenario. It's pretty darn useful for fighting as well, but there are some problems with it. It's not good for going out in the open seas, because as you can see, it is broad, but it is shallow draft, and it is low in terms of freeboard. And the trouble is there are lots of gaps which you might not be able to get a shot through, you might not even see daylight through, but water can work its way through. Combined with the interesting and sometimes variable reliability of steam technology at this time, and you have a scenario where you have a vessel that is less than 1,000 tons full displacement, that is less than 55 meters long, a little over 12.6 meters wide, 3.2 meters in draft. So just do those figures. Think about how fat it is versus how long it is versus how deep its draft is, and you get a vessel which is really good for inshore waters, really good for manoeuvring in the shallows, really not something you want to take into the actual sea. And then you give it a vibrating lever steam engine, which are fun. Go see the steam engine video for more details about those. It's driving a single shaft with a top speed of 6 knots if it's all working perfectly. A crew of 49. Armed with two 11-inch smoothbore Dahlgren guns. 8 inches of armour around the turret, because that is pretty much the only thing that you can see. A very small waterline belt of between 3 and 5 inches, depending on the area you are, but let's be honest, that waterline, as you can see from this, is literally at the waterline. Skip, and you'll miss it. The deck is 1 inch of thick of armour, and the pilot house has 9 inches thickness of armour around it. This whole ship design is a work in progress. That is the thing about monitors. You have to remember, at the time, the world is still developing. They've just started sticking armour on guns. Oh, no, armour on ships. They've just started sticking guns which have high explosive. They've just started making all these things work. And they're thrust into a war. And as we all know, health and safety in armed forces is variable. The very job itself, the very role itself, is not exactly good for your health. This is something which is made more complicated by the urgency of war. Things which in peacetime you'd go, we're not going to accept that. No. Go away, think about it. In wartime, you go, how much time will that save? How much viability will that make? You ask those questions. How urgent is this needed? And then once you have a design, you tend to churn out multiples of it because it worked. And you don't have time to develop something better, or maybe to look at it and go, There be issues here. There be issues. Ericsson had apparently originally offered the monitor type design to Emperor Napoleon III, but the Ministry de la Marine seems to have no records of it. The first ironclad vessels, including of course the Stevens battery, which had been begun in 1854 by the United States, had resulted in the creation of Gloire and Warrior. And the US really became interested in them when they found that the Merrimac was being converted to an ironclad. The plan for the now very Virginia was that it would be used to break not just the blockade, but go up and down the coast smashing American ships. And let's be honest, the Virginia is better built for that. The Virginia, for example, actually has... I'm surprised I'm going to say this, but I feel it's necessary to say, actually does have some clearance above the water. Not much. Please note, it's not much. She doesn't have that much in terms of capability above the water. But what she mostly has, and this is something which is worthwhile thinking, she does actually have a draft of 6.4 meters and a beam of 15.6 meters and a length of 83.8 meters. So she's still not what I would call an ocean-going vessel, but by golly, she'll actually make a better go of it. The thing is, she has a belt of between 1 and 3 inches thick of armour, a deck of 1 inch of armour, and a case made of 4 inches of armour. Now, her complement is also roughly 320, because she's armed with 2 7-inch Brook rifle guns, 2 6.4-inch Brook rifles, and 6 9-inch Dahlgren smoothbores. She is a far more potent vessel in terms of firepower, but the bigger problem for her is, how do you hit the Monitor? You see, the Virginia is this big slab-sided thing. You know, it's angled sides, but, it's this rather big target. The Monitor is not. And despite the fact that this battle, which they come and they fight, it goes on for hours in the Hampton Roads, Virginia actually stops firing because there's no point. There's no point in firing at the Monitor because she has 8 inches of armour around that turret. And that's the only thing you can hit. Or maybe the pilot house. But that's got 9 inches. So it's take your pick. There is nothing on either side which can pierce 8 inches of armour, let alone 9 inches. In fact, considering the little damage done to the Virginia, there's nothing that can really pierce 4 inches of the armour at the time. So they just sit there battering each other for hours. So why is the Monitor described as winning? Because the Virginia stops firing and the Monitor keeps firing. And the Virginia goes away and the Monitor stays and claims victory because the ground has been conceded. The Virginia had already destroyed the USS Cumberland, the USS Congress, and the USS Minnesota. Well, she'd driven her aground. And when the Monitor arrived, the Virginia was coming out to finish off the Minnesota and the St. Lawrence. Because, well, she'd run out of ammunition pretty much. It's terrible. Done so much destroying of the enemy, I've run out of ammunition. Need to go back and rearm. The Monitor becomes the Union ironclad design. And they make lots of them. They really do. And of course the Virginia, well, she gets sacrificed to the advancing Union army. They're forced to scuttle and destroy her as they withdraw in May 1862 from Norfolk and its naval shipyard. Monitor sailed up the James River to support the Union Army in the Peninsula Campaign. She was probably one of the more in comparison to McClellan, who was in charge at that point of the Union forces. She was probably a lot more active than the general. In chief, as he liked to call himself. And then she's ordered to join the Union blockade off North Carolina. On her way there, she founders while on the tow off during a storm off Cape Hatteras in December the 31st. Her wreck was discovered in 1973 and it's been partially salvaged. You can find all the salvage items pretty much in the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia. But why did this become such a seminal moment? Because very quickly, the reason Monitor wins even in the post-history is because the turret concept wins. And the reason the turret concept wins is because it now has set up a race between armor versus firepower. And the bigger guns you put up, the heavier they are. And the fewer you can carry. And doing a broadside arrangement doesn't really help. So eventually, you need turrets. And you start to get the combination of turrets and casemates, the fusing of the Monitor design and the Warrior design of how to armour a vessel. And that's how you evolve into the pre-Dreadnought and then eventually the Dreadnought. If we consider the modern Citadel system, and I say modern in relative terms, modern by sort of, by the time we're talking about armoured Citadels in sort of the Dreadnought era, but today, even today, the Citadel system in terms of most ship design. Thanks to the various subdivision you have going on in the hull, both lengthwise and beamwise, you have a lot of spaces created, and that's sort of like, well, to be honest, like the system that was on Warrior, which was there's an armoured citadel in the middle of the ship. The rest of the ship enables it to function as a ship, but as long as that armoured citadel is protected, is still secure and is solid, the ship will remain afloat. No matter how much damage happens to the rest of it, it'll still float. Well, that's continued on with ship design. But if we consider it, what has happened with the firepower? Well, the firepower's gone up, but it's still got a case of we've got to turn it around. We started off with monitor turrets, and then eventually turrets, and then if you consider missile systems, eventually it started out on swing arm system, and now they're on VLS. Why? Because your arms were limited by the ship's superstructure. Your VLS isn't. Because the missile goes up and reaches a point and goes, oh, I will need to go that way, which is straight back over the superstructure. My sister had extra help today. I did mine earlier. not sure why Microsoft Word just opened up. Apologies. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. A little discussion of USS Monitor in roughly 20 minutes. And the question was this: what happens if Merrimack, aka Virginia, wins? I'm not sure how she'd win. I presume she'd have to ram the Monitor somehow. I think that's the only way she could get us. They could both do roughly 6 knots. So if Monitor's engine stalled and Merrimack managed to do it, if they managed to ram her, maybe? What do you think happens? How does that change what? I don't think that changes the outcome of the Civil War. I'm sorry for anyone who believes that if Virginia wins, the South will rise and win. They don't. There is just... it's infrastructure and logistics, okay? Like most wars, it doesn't come down to the sexy things of elan and glory and who has the fanciest piece of equipment. It comes down to infrastructure and logistics. So, what do you think if Virginia wins? What do you think happens to ship design? Thank you very much for watching, and take care.